I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and this Monday we're going to talk about the Applied Ballistics seminar. This last week, Thursday and Friday, which would be November 3rd and November 4th, I was down in Sophia, North Carolina at the Caraway Conference Center attending the Applied Ballistics seminar. For those of you guys that have been in precision rifle shooting for a while, I'm sure you've heard of Applied Ballistics, and I'm sure you've heard of Brian Litz. This conference is basically a way to personally interact with Brian and some of the other Applied Ballistics crew. Now, Brian is quite literally a rocket scientist, but he's also a member of the U.S. rifle team. He's shot a long-range rifle for quite some time, and he is the chief ballistician for Berger Bullets. Now, the first thing, ballistics is all about math. It's all about computation. It's all about formulas. But that really shouldn't intimidate you from delving into this stuff, because the seminar and a lot of the materials that I have here basically break down all this deep science into a way that most mere mortals can understand. So it really helps convey it to every man. And you really can't make any mistake about it. Precision long-range rifle shooting is all about math. It's all about ballistics. But a lot of it is about picking out what you need to know and what you need to concentrate and getting rid of the noise, just all that extra stuff that really doesn't apply or that gets lost when you put environmental factors into it. And that was one of the great things that I took away from this conference. I learned the things that I really need to concentrate on and the things that I can kind of downplay because they don't matter a whole lot. Now, the Applied Ballistics seminar, tuition for it is $500, but when we started to look at what you get for that $500, it really adds up quickly. First of all, you get all of the Applied Ballistics books, all of their current books, and the DVD set with a bonus DVD, which adds up to approximately a $250 value. Then they also give you a download link to download the AB Analytics software, which is another $200 value. And the AB Analytics software has an advanced ballistic calculator, and it also has the weapon employment zone analysis software built into it. In part of the conference, we talked about the weapons employment zone analysis and how it can help our average shooters to determine what's important and what is not important. And we'll get into that a little bit more here shortly. But the Caraway Conference Center, where this conference was held, is in Sophia, North Carolina. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So the nice thing about this is you could purchase a package with the seminar that included a hotel room there, and it included your lunch and dinner. Now, lunch and dinner at the conference center was included with the seminar, regardless of if you purchased the rooms or not. But the closest town was about 10 to 15 minutes away from where the conference center was. I stayed off-site. I stayed at the Holiday Inn in Asheboro, North Carolina, so I did have about a 15-minute drive each morning to get to the conference, but there were plenty of rooms available at the conference center. They are kind of Spartan rooms. You just have bed and bath facilities and that, no TVs, no electronics and stuff. But I think that's kind of within the design of what the conference center is. And if you go check out Caraway Conference Center's website, you'll see that they're really geared more towards retreats and that kind of thing. I had a little bit of drive to get into the conference, but everything at the conference center was pretty nice. The conference room that we were in was very nice, neat, clean, well lit, had two great big overhead display screens on either side of the podium, so you could really see the presentation and what was going on. Now, the presentation, when it actually kicked off, it was PowerPoint, but it's not the common death by PowerPoint that you get. The PowerPoint slides were really well done, and it helped to explain topics instead of teaching off the PowerPoint, which generally just leads to incredible boredom. Now, one of the nice things they did is this binder here in front of me. They printed out the entire PowerPoint for all the blocks of instructions and supplied this binder to you when you arrived. And they only put one slide per page in the binder, so it ends up being this really thick stack of pages. But the beautiful thing about that is now you have half a page underneath it to take notes. And I really ended up taking a lot of notes, things that interested me or things that I wanted to look up in the books later on. I had plenty of room to write that down, and I also had the ability to write down questions that I had as we went through this. The thing that I enjoyed about the seminar is at the beginning, at the introduction, Brian went through his background, how he got into long-range shooting and how he got into the career that he was in. But then he also interacted with the audience and asked pretty much how we broke down as far as the type of shooters we had in attendance, because of course long-range shooting stretches the gamut from F-class and ELR down to tactical, precision, and even law enforcement and military shooting. So we had a really wide range of people in attendance, but as Brian went through, he had people raise their hands to indicate what type of shooting they were involved in or what type of shooting they were interested in, and that helped kind of steer some of the topics to which direction we wanted to go through. He also asked if there were any topics that were not covered in the outline that we wanted to hear about. And of course, it's a pretty extensive outline, so nobody really had anything they specifically wanted to have covered that was not already covered in one of the blocks of instruction. He harped on the primary focus of this is accuracy. Now, of course, you have precision and you have accuracy, and there's a difference between the two. Precision is basically how tight your rifle will shoot. Accuracy is putting that group on target, putting that group where you want to go. And a lot of the stuff that Applied Ballistics does is about predicting accuracy, predicting where that shot group is going to go. And for long-range shooters, when we're trying to get those extended range cold bore shots, it's all about accuracy. It's less about precision. It's all about predicting exactly where that bullet's going to go. Now, of course, they kind of go hand in hand, because great accuracy, if the precision of your system is, say, 10 MOA, and you've got great accuracy, those bullets are still going to kind of impact around your target. So there is a little bit of hand in hand in both, but the focus was on accuracy. As we went through the different blocks of instruction, there was a lot of stuff that was based around math, and there was a lot of stuff that was based on charts and different data points. And throughout all of this, some of the things that I was posting online, some of the pictures of the conference or pictures of the different slides, there were people that were getting a little anxious, I guess, about the math. Now, I'm not a math whiz. I do fairly decent in solving equations and understanding equations and how different things in math operate. But you really shouldn't look at this and go, oh, I would never go to one of these seminars because I'm not good at math. The way things are explained and the way they're broken down in the presentation and in the books makes it much easier to understand than you would think. You don't have to be a math whiz to go to one of these and get a lot out of it. But going through, one of the things that they discussed is what factors have impact on your trajectory. They discussed different ways on how Applied Ballistics goes about calculating ballistic coefficients, how ballistic coefficients in general are calculated, and this really helps you to figure out what factors to apply when you're trying to determine the ballistics of a round. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and you can really get lost in some of the information that's floating around out there. But they really talked about how they get the data and what data is important and how that data applies to the whole shooting problem. They also had quite a few other kind of guest instructors there. One was Emil Praslik, who is a former head coach of AMU. He's currently retired from that, but he put on an excellent block basically about wind factors and how to estimate the wind. And one thing that he said there that really really got to me and really may affect the way that I go about solving wind problems in the future is get aggressive with your wind calls. He said you want to get aggressive with your wind calls and use a pretty heavy wind call until you get to the point that you are missing on the professional side of the target. He talked about the professional side of the target and the amateur side of the target. Very common, and I see myself doing this regularly. We won't put enough wind on the gun, we'll shoot and we'll miss on the downwind side because we were trying to pussyfoot into our wind call. Whereas if you take an aggressive wind call, you're usually going to be better off than if you took a conservative wind call. And he said that, you know, amateurs will generally miss on the downwind side of the target. Professionals, if they miss, will miss on the upwind side of the target. He said, so make aggressive wind calls until you start missing on the professional side and then dial it back. So that's definitely something that I'm going to apply to my shooting. So right off in the first couple of blocks of instruction, I saw something that I could use to make myself a better shooter. He also talked about some varying ways to calculate your wind that I will be working on. And it's basically based on edge to edge of the target. How aggressive a wind call can you get before you're going to throw it off the up-hand side? And so you have a different window to get your wind call in. And it would really be a disservice to him for me to try to teach you what he taught. But I'm covering it because it's one of those things that this block of instruction on wind reading wasn't so much on how to determine if it's a 3 mile an hour, 4 mile an hour, or 5 mile an hour wind, which he did talk about that, but it's when you get that call, what to do with it. That was the part that I said, wow, okay, because generally I can get a pretty good wind call. It's about how I apply the ballistic equation to engaging the target that will get me in trouble from time to time. So that was our morning, and they kind of eased into it. You didn't just get slapped with heavy math right off the bat. You kind of rolled into the seminar, and topics got deeper and deeper as we went forward. Then we broke for lunch, and lunch and dinner was provided at the Caraway Conference Center. They have a dining area, and lunch was served buffet style. And the food was definitely adequate. It wasn't what I would call 5-star or stellar food, but there was enough. It was served buffet style, so you could go through and get what you needed to get. There was a salad bar available, desserts. They had lemonade and iced tea. So it was definitely adequate, and it was necessary because, again, I mentioned it was 10 to 15 minutes to any kind of city or town. So if you had to go out and get lunch and come back, that's going to cut a sizable amount of time out of a really packed-in day because the seminar started in the morning and it went past dinner. So it was really necessary to be able to eat on site and get back to it. So we had exactly an hour for lunch, and then we came back in. And on the first day, we got back in and did some more discussion about wind, how wind deflection actually works. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding about the wind actually blows the bullet off target, and that's not actually what happens. The wind doesn't really blow the bullet off target. The wind pushing on the bullet causes yaw in the bullet, and it causes the bullet to steer in a different direction, and that's what causes your wind drift. So really, Brian had some excellent explanations on how that works, and he has that in the books as well. So these books are definitely a really, really important thing for you to read through, even if you've gone to this seminar. The books carry the information in a whole lot more detail than you really could delve into in a 2-day seminar. But the advantage of the seminar is if you don't understand something, you can ask clarifying questions, and you don't really have to be afraid because you're sitting in a room with a bunch of people that also have questions. So while you never want to be that guy that's asking 10 questions on each topic and makes things take forever, you definitely want to condense your questions into a cohesive statement. That way you can get the information you need and you can get something out of the seminar. So I really appreciate the fact that if I didn't quite understand a concept, or if I wasn't sure if the way I understood it was actually the way it worked. I could ask a question to clarify, get an answer, and then go on to the next topic instead of dwelling on, did I get that right? I'm not really sure about this. So this is where the seminar really helps out versus just reading the books. So the wind deflection and wind analysis, that was right after lunch, but we were mostly able to follow it. And in all of these, I never found any situation where I was starting to drift off, where my concentration was starting to wane, even after lunch, because they make the blocks of instruction very interesting, and there is enough interaction that you're not just zoning out looking at a display screen with a PowerPoint presentation on it. So they really kept you interested and really kept going. Block 7, Brian covered strategies for managing wind and competition. This is one of the few spots in the seminar where I didn't feel that there was a lot for me and the shooting that I did. The strategies that Brian covered for wind and competition really applies to F-class or any of the shooting competitions where you have a very wide amount of time to get your shots downrange. Not necessarily like a PRS competition where you may have 90 seconds to fire 10 shots. In that case, you can't wait for the wind, you can't wait for a favorable wind, you have to shoot in the wind that you're given at that time. But one of the things that I was really gratified to see is that Brian readily admitted that PRS and tactical type competition is something that's new for him. So the strategies that he uses in F-class competition, in an ELR competition, that doesn't really apply to PRS or to tactical shooting where you have a live target that you've got to get shot down range now. So he readily admitted when it was a place where his experience level started to be a little bit thin versus where he has a vast amount of experience. And I have a lot of respect for people that are able to do that, that can say, well, that's not really my expertise. I think it could work this way here, or you could kind of apply these things here, or you can't apply these things here, and it's a totally different thing. Brian did shoot the Guardian long range match when I was up in Michigan. We did the after action report for that. So I did get to talk to him a little bit up there about some of the things that he saw that were different from competition that he's used to. But he is getting out there and trying different types of competition. So it is expanding his knowledge base, and I'm sure you'll see very soon if he keeps shooting those kind of matches where he'll be able to tailor his experiences from F-class into what he knows for PRS. So I'll be interested to see his views on that kind of shooting going forward if he keeps it up. A little bit later in the afternoon, Brian covered the King of 2 Miles shooting event in the extended long range, and he also kind of expanded on what he considers ELR or extended long range shooting. What he talks about in extended long range shooting or extreme long range shooting is shooting into the transonic zone of the cartridge, where it starts to drop through the sound barrier and into the subsonic zone. And for a 308, that could be 1,000 yards. For a 300 Win Mag or 6.5 Creedmoor or 260, depending on the bullets, that could be out closer to a mile. And for cartridges like 375 Shaytac, that could be way out there. So it all depends on what you're shooting, where that ELR distance starts. But when you start shooting ELR and you start shooting through that transonic zone, the bullet goes through some different aerodynamic effects, and it causes you to have to do some different things or pay attention to different things during that bullet's flight. So he really delved into that, but then specifically into the King of 2 Miles event and the strategies that they used going into that competition and the equipment that they used going into that competition. And that was carried over on into day 2 with Mitch Fitzpatrick, who actually won the King of 2 Miles event with a custom rifle shooting a 400 grain 375 bullet. It's a Berger prototype bullet, and he was shooting it in .375 lethal magnum, which is a Wildcat that they designed specifically for this competition. And so it was kind of interesting hearing about all the things they went through into that, certain problems that they had with gaining enough elevation to get that far out, because shooting at 2 miles, you're cranking a lot of elevation on those scopes to actually get out that far. So again, it was very interesting hearing all the stuff that they went through for that. Not necessarily something that I'm focusing on, because I have no desire to shoot a King of 2 Miles event. The amount of money that you have to sink into that kind of rig and setting up to truly be competitive in that is beyond my resources right now, but it's still something I find academically interesting. Then in the afternoon, Nick Vitalbo gave us a really great block of instruction on laser rangefinders. He talked about some of the limits to current laser rangefinder technology, some of the things that go into a good laser rangefinder versus a mediocre laser rangefinder, things like beam divergence, some of the things they have to fight on signal to noise ratio. And it was nice to hear all these factors going into it because it kind of gave you a practical knowledge base to be able to evaluate laser rangefinders on. He talked about some of the things to look into on different laser rangefinders, and actually went into some of the testing that they did on a variety of different laser rangefinders to see what their real-world performance was on various targets with various levels of reflectivity. He also talked about some of the differences between military laser rangefinders and civilian laser rangefinders, and some of the new stuff that may be on the horizon. So it was a really, really great period of instruction. And again, this is one of those where this seminar actually can end up saving you some money. Because after looking at all the data they had out there, there was actually one graph that they put up that had basically dollar per meters of resolution, and it broke down what laser rangefinders were the most cost effective. And going through all this and looking at all the stuff and knowing what laser rangefinders that I have access to right now really made me decide to hold off until the next generation of laser rangefinders hit before I spend some money on a new laser rangefinder. So again, really interesting stuff that really gave us some value for what you're paying for this seminar. Well, after that block, we had dinner, and again, dinner was buffet style down in the cafeteria or the dining room at the Caraway Conference Center, and then we had what are called breakout sessions after that. And the breakout sessions were marked on the sheet as 6:30 to 7:30, but they really were basically 6:30 to completion. Quite a few of them ran pretty late. And what the breakout sessions were is each one of the presenters would go to a different section in the conference center, and you could just kind of mill about and pop in and pop out to the various different rooms, and you had the ability to ask them questions either that applied to the block of instruction that they gave that day, or ask them questions that are just in their area of expertise and get some more personalized answers to your situation. I thought this was really great because it gave a more personal feel to the thing, and it also is great for those people that may have difficulty speaking in public. Maybe you had a question that you didn't want to stand up in front of the whole conference room and ask. Well, there you could approach in a little bit more of a personal environment and ask your question. Now, obviously, I don't have any problems talking in front of people, so I didn't have any issues with asking my questions in the conference room, but you don't generally feel that it's a good use of time to ask someone a question that is about something outside of the block of instruction that they are talking about. So that was great. It was also a really relaxing environment. One of the groups kind of took possession of the back porch and the fire pit at the conference center. And so that was a really relaxing area to go out and just have discussions with other attendees because we had a really wide variety of expertise in the attendees. We had military and law enforcement shooters. We had long-range competitors. We had industry people. We had some people that their trade is ballistics, that they actually work for various different ammunition or ballistics companies that were there attending the seminar, just like I was. So it was really nice to talk to all these people. And it was great because we did have a good number of viewers, you guys that watch Mail Call Mondays, that were there in attendance. So it was nice for me to meet some of you guys in person. And I love when you guys come up to me and tell me you watch the show and what you like about it or what you dislike about it. That's great feedback for me, and I absolutely love it. So thank you for those of you guys that were there that did approach me and tell me you watch the show. I really appreciate that. So the breakout sessions continued basically until everybody was done. I stayed out there a couple of hours and then headed back to the hotel. And the next day started bright and early, and the really nice thing about when you have conferences like this where you have a lot of information packed into a few days, it's really nice to see when they start on time. I hate going to something away where I've spent a lot of time to travel. I've got there and I really want to get on with things, and it just drags on and they don't start on time and they're way behind on everything. So when things start on time, it's really great to see. We started off with basic spin stability and advanced spin stability. And this approached the subject that I was really interested in, and that's fast twist barrels. At what point does overspinning a bullet reach a point of diminishing returns? When should you do it? When shouldn't you do it? What effects can you see? And what problems can you have with overspinning bullets? And for some time, Todd Hodnett has put his information out there about why he prefers super fast twist barrels and things of this nature. But it was nice to see it really broken down and see the formulas behind it and see the exact factors that go into it that make it a good idea or not a good idea. And they gave us access to some tools and pointed them to some stuff like Burger Bullets has a spin stability calculator on their homepage, which is great. It's not just isolated to the Burger Bullets. You can put in whatever bullet you happen to be shooting as long as you know the dimensions on it. And then it'll go through and it will tell you where the stable spin rate is, what the actual stability factor is, and a lot of people don't realize this, and I kind of knew it in the back of my mind, but I didn't push it to the forefront until going through this block of instruction. But your ballistic coefficient is affected by your stability factor and by your spin rate. So the faster you spin the bullet, the higher you get the ballistic coefficient. Of course, that also reaches a point of diminishing returns. So it was really nice to hear about that and be able to ask the questions like, where does that point stop? Where do we not need to worry about spinning the bullet any faster because we don't get any increase in the ballistic coefficient? And I shouldn't say increase in the ballistic coefficient. A better way to describe it would be the further away you get from peak stability, the more the ballistic coefficient degrades. So you can't get a better ballistic coefficient by super spinning the bullet, but if you don't spin it fast enough, you won't get the maximum ballistic coefficient the bullet is capable of. So I hope I explained that better. Obviously, Brian Litz explained it much better than I just did, but it was a really, really great block of instruction, and it will affect the way that I select bullets and the way I select barrels going forward on future projects. Again, we got into a little bit into extended long-range shooting because spin stability feeds into that, how your bullet works in the transonic range. So walk through a little bit of that. And then Brian got into sights. And for most of what we're doing, sights are optical sights, rifle scopes, but different things like the importance of cant, the importance of using a scope level, which is something I don't currently do consistently, but I'm going to do some experiments going forward to see if I can improve what I'm doing by use of a scope level. And I've always asserted that a scope level is an individual thing, that some people don't really need it because they don't have a problem with canning the gun. Some people, much like the guy that can't really get a picture level in his house without breaking out a carpenter's level. If you're one of those guys that have to break out a carpenter's level to get a picture level in your house, then a level on your scope or on your chassis system really may be a good option for you. But he also got into how to level scopes and what is important. Also, during the sights procedure, he got into the tall target test and some tracking tests and some ways to make sure that your rifle scope is tracking. And then in combination with the Kestrel software and the AB Analytics software, how to add that factor in if your scope is not tracking, if you're not absolutely getting 1 mil for 1 mil of dialed elevation, if you're getting something like 0.98 mils instead, how to add that correction factor into the software so that now you get a ballistic solution that you can actually apply to your sight and get a first round hit on a target. After that, Mitch Fitzpatrick stepped up and talked to us a little bit about the King of 2 Miles, how he developed the 375 Lethal Magnum cartridge, and some of the considerations that went into developing the rifle that he used to shoot that cartridge. And that, again, is really outside my realm of expertise, but it was very interesting to hear the factors that went into it, how he developed the gun, how he decided on what powders he needed to experiment with for that cartridge, because when you wildcat a cartridge, especially something this large, obviously you can't just bust open a loading manual and pick a powder. You have to have a good idea on what powders may work for you already and how to go through choosing a fast or a slow powder for it. And then even into the bullets, because they were using a prototype bullet, a copper solid, that works a little bit differently, has a little bit different center of gravity than a standard copper jacketed lead bullet. So hearing all those factors put together and how they attacked each of those problems was very interesting, really enjoyable. Mitch put on a great block of instruction. I think he's relatively new to doing this stuff, but as he got into it, he just rolled into it, and he's doing a great job with this. Again, we broke for lunch. We came back from lunch, and then we went into the weapon employment zone. And this is a block that Brian did, and he really discussed how weapon employment zone analysis, or WEZ analysis, can help you in determining how a change in your system, whatever change that may be, will affect your hit percentage at specific ranges. And the AB Analytics tool has a WEZ page on it where you can go through and you can change things in your gun setup, and you can see exactly how that will affect your hit percentage. And later on in the day, we actually went through and got in depth with the WEZ software and actually saw how each one of those factors affected things. But things that Brian talked about in his WEZ block was how to really look at what you're doing and what the effect is on target. And one of the great examples they used is the difference between a 1 MOA gun and a 1/4 MOA gun. Well, everybody likes to spend so much time at the loading bench, so much time tweaking things on their gun. It's not as difficult to take a 1 MOA gun and get it down to a 1/2 MOA gun by tweaking your load and tweaking setups on the gun and things like that. But it takes a ton more effort to get from that 1/2 MOA gun to that 1/4 MOA gun. And is it really important in long range shooting? Well, with a WEZ analysis, you can go in and you can change just that one factor, moving the gun from a 1/2 minute gun to a 1/4 minute gun. Or you can go in, if you're a hand loader and you're tweaking your SDs, you can go in and just change the SD and see what your hit percentage was with this SD and what your hit percentage was with this SD. So then you can evaluate, is it important to you to spend that time at the bench working on those things, or is it more important to spend that time at the firing line improving your consistency to deploy that gun and get the most out of that gun? So it was really going through that software and plugging that stuff in and actually seeing the change in the hit percentages really enhanced what I kind of already believed, is that at some point you need to stop working on the gun, you need to stop working on the load, and you just need to go out and work on your consistency to shoot that gun and your consistency in calling wind. Because a lot of the stuff that we were doing in the WEZ analysis, when you got done and you looked at it, you can actually throw up a graph that shows which factors in which percentage which ratio are causing the greatest percentage of deviation in your hit potential. And what we saw over and over again is even if you are an exceptional wind caller, then that wind deviation will usually be the biggest factor in opening up your groups at long range. So that tells me that instead of sitting at your bench or sitting at the 100-yard line or 200-yard line trying to fine-tune that load, I need to get out at the 800 and 900-yard line and call wind. And get my ability to call wind and to get that wind solution and get that hit on target. That will make the biggest difference in my hit percentage. So being able to take what you know and what you feel, but actually be able to see it in an analytic program really reinforces what you should be doing. So the weapon employment zone analysis is something I'm probably going to start doing more often when I'm looking at equipment and looking at bullets and loads, and then after that, getting out and actually using it on the firing line. Brian talked a little bit about group analysis, and I won't harp on that much, but just basically translating to what you're seeing on target into what you're doing. We had a little bit of a change because Eric Steckler from Berger Bullets was supposed to come out and actually talk to us about their stuff. Instead, Ian from Vortex Optics came out and gave us a really, really great block about scope design and what goes into scopes, what kind of factors make a good scope, what kind of factors make for problems in scopes. And some of the reasons why you see big fat scopes in one design and more compact scopes in similar magnification ranges. It was really, really interesting talking about the mechanics inside the scopes and how the lenses are set up. And Ian had the best explanation and graphics for the difference between a first focal plane and a second focal plane scope that I've seen in a long time. And basically the way he explained it is all scopes have a first focal plane and a second focal plane. It's just where they set that reticle in the scope determines if the reticle is going to subtend the same amount at all magnification powers or if it's going to subtend a different amount at different magnification powers. So it was really interesting to actually see those graphics and hear his explanation. And again, he did a great job of delving into the intricacies of scope design, and I really enjoyed it. After that, Nick Vitalbo and Doc Beach went into the AB Analytics software and went down piece by piece into exactly what factors do what things and what pitfalls to avoid, what things you want to make sure that you don't put zeros in certain boxes and it'll cause problems. So being able to go through block by block on the software and know what affects what was really great, and it helps get the most out of that software. And again, it was awesome that this $200 piece of software was included with the tuition to the seminar. So really what you walked away from the seminar with was fairly equal to what you paid to get there. After that, we again had dinner, and then we went into our final breakout sessions and went around, talked to the different attendees, got to talk to the different presenters, and again I got to sit in and listen to Brian answer questions on various different topics. And one of the topics that he didn't really cover in the seminar itself was reloading, how he does his load workups. He requested that if we wanted to know that, we talked to him during the breakout session. So it was nice of me to go in and actually be able to get a detailed breakdown on how Brian goes through and selects powders, how he does his load workup, how he determines his powder charge, and how he fine-tunes it from there. So that was interesting, and that's actually information that I will probably use when we go into the load workup for the 300 Win Mag, the Remington 700 long range, coming up here soon. So again, when I look back over the sheet and the different blocks of instructions, I can actually see blocks of instructions where after listening to what that person says, it actually is going to make a change in how I do things on the range, or it's at least going to cause me to experiment with doing things a little bit differently and see how that affects my rounds on target, or how that affects how quickly I can get components together to work up a load, or how much better performance I get out of a gun build now because I maybe understand a concept a little bit better than I did before. Absolutely, I believe that I got a ton of value out of the 2-day course, and I would highly recommend it to just about anyone who really wants to know more about the science of long-range rifle shooting. Now, one thing that I will say is that if you are a brand new shooter and you are just getting into long-range shooting, you want to make sure that you have a really good handle on the factors that go into affecting your bullet flight before you try to go to one of these. Have a little bit of time on the ground behind the rifle, maybe have made some mistakes or gone to some professional training where you've really been forced to the edge of your comfort zone in shooting rifles. Otherwise, when you come into this, you may not really be able to visualize some of the concepts, although they do a really, really good job of explaining these concepts. But if you've been shooting for a couple of years or longer, you've been competing or you've been out really trying to refine your rifle at longer range, I absolutely can recommend this seminar. It is really going to help you out. It may save you some money. It may cause you to change some of the ways that you're doing things, but it is definitely worthwhile. There's a ton of experience at these things, both in the presenters and the attendees, and I guarantee you will get something out of it. I really want to thank Applied Ballistics for inviting me to come out to this seminar. They asked me to come out and check it out, and there was really no request on their part to actually do any media, do a write-up or anything. So I really appreciate them asking me to come out. It was a great time. This is a little bit of an abbreviated overview of what went on there because there really was just so much information covered. I mean, you see these books sitting next to me. I have some of the previous volumes in my cabinet already that I've read, but it's going to take me a while to read through all this and absorb all this knowledge, and it's really great knowledge to take you to that next level as a precision rifle shooter. But since we couldn't cover it all here, we also have a write-up on our website, and I will leave that link down in the description below. So please make sure you go read through our after-action report from the seminar. If you guys have any questions or comments, hopefully that I'll be able to answer, please leave them in the comments section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you've liked this video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot.